Hi and welcome to Steve's Heritage Kitchen. Today I'm going to do a short video for you. I always say short video, it turns into a big long video. But I'm going to do a short video for you today because I decided to make some corned beef and pastrami. You start out the same way with either one. I found these two cuts of meat at the store for less money. This is brisket. Both are brisket. Brisket is what you make corned beef out of, and pastrami, generally, although you can make it out of different cuts of meat. So basically the idea is to turn it into corned beef first, which means you're going to brine it for a period of time, like 5 days in a brine, and then it's boiled. You can make it boiled tender, you can just boil it as corned beef and slice it for sandwiches. And then pastrami takes a little longer. That's more spices and a lot of smoking time. So, but we're just going to start it out today. So I'm going to show you how I do this. I've got a bucket here. This is a 2-gallon bucket. It's going to take a gallon of brine. This is 3.5 pounds, so this is enough brine to do 4 pounds. So we're going to mix it up. I'm going to show you how I mix it up, and then we're going to set the meat onto brine, and then I'll have to come back and show you how it turns out. So first of all, I measured out a gallon of water. The recipe calls for distilled water. That's probably the best. If you have good water, chlorinated water is a little bit, and any stuff in it's going to add to the flavoring possibly. So I have well water here, so this is well water. I measure out a gallon, and then, because what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to, I'm going to heat part of it so I can dissolve. So we have the salt and the sugar that goes in the recipe. Hang on a second. Okay, so that's the whole idea. So I have a gallon of water, and to that I'm going to add 8 ounces. And it's best to measure it out if you have a scale. I'm going to add 8 ounces of kosher salt. And again, most of the water is still in here, but I put enough in here that I know that I can heat it and dissolve the sugar and the salt. And then I'm going to add it to the cold water, and that means it'll take less time to get cold again so I can put the meat in. So that was the 8 ounces of salt, 1 cup of brown sugar, and that's basically what I'm going to heat on the stove. So I'm going to heat this on the stove, but I don't think you need to see that, until it's dissolved, and then we'll mix everything together, and I'll show you in a second. Okay, so I heated this on the stove. It's not real hot, but it's what I thought would be warm enough to dissolve the salt and the sugar. Alright, you can see the pot of water here, and the 2 cuts of meat. I just wanted to say a little bit about the meat. These were already cut. So the best way to get a brisket is to get the whole thing packaged in the same package that the supermarket gets it from before anybody's messed with it, because then you can choose, for instance, how much fat. See, there's a layer of fat here that is going to be left on. Now they've taken a lot of whatever was on the top here. You don't know what was on the top. So, and the same thing with this one. You see they left just this much fat. So when you get the whole brisket yourself and you decide what you're going to do with it, you can choose, because I guarantee you the fat is what's going to keep your meat juicy and deliver a lot of the flavor. So, and these were on sale because they were about to expire, but this is way more expensive than I would ever spend for a brisket, which is a piece of tough meat that people used years and years ago because it was tough and no one wanted it. But now it's kind of fancy to use. Anyway, so I've got my water. It's a little bit warm still. I'm going to add my spices. And this is 5 tablespoons of pickling spice. Goes right in here. And I've got 4 cloves of garlic that I crushed with my knife. And I'll put that in there. And then I have 2 teaspoons of Insecure #1, pink salt #1, Prague powder. There's a lot of different names for it. It's the #1. So it's an Insecure #1. This is what you use for not charcuterie, but this kind of preserving of meat. So I'm going to put that in there too. And that's basically all of the spices and everything that go into the brine for the brisket. So now I'm going to take this. Let's see this. And I'm going to add all of this to the cold water. And make sure that I got it all out. It didn't quite. So I want to make sure I got all the spices and everything that is called for into my bucket. Now the bucket was cold water. So, I mean, it was really cold water. So this is going to cool down, and it will be appropriate temperature for to start this. And then this is going to go, once I put the meat in, it's going to go in the refrigerator for about 5 days. So let's see, I'm going to take this piece of meat here, put this right in there. And then this piece of meat, put this right in here. Now, I think you can see this. So basically, that's it. Now we're just going to let them age, or brine, and the brine for about, like I said, about 5 days. The other thing you want to do is to weight this down. What you don't want is the meat floating up, and it probably will. So I usually get a plate, small plate. Something that will fit is a small plate. Something that will fit in the top of here, and make sure that the meat stays submerged. Okay, so I also have a lid. Get on here. There we go. And that's it. Okay, so that's it. That's basically all it is to it. That's why it is really kind of nice to do this yourself, because you get a much better product. And of course, I do this, so I think it's fun. But as far as actually spending a lot of time, it's basically you get your hunk of meat, mix up your spices and your brine, put them together for 5 days, and you're good to go. I mean, after the 5 days, well, I'll show you. We just take the meat out. Also, it's a good idea to, in your refrigerator or wherever you got this, every now and then to give it a little shake here and there to stir it up, make sure that all the meat is coming in contact with the brine so that it brines clear through. Now, these are small pieces of meat, so after 5 days they should be just fine. If they were thicker, it would be different. So yeah, I think this is a lot of fun. I will come back after the 5 days and I will show you what we do next, and we'll take it all the way to pastrami. Okay, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Hi, and welcome back to Steve's Heritage Kitchen. Can you see me? We are in the midst of making corned beef, which is what we got now. and then we're going to move ahead with some pastrami. But we have 2 pieces of meat that have been in the brine for 6 days now. Anywhere from 5 to 7 is good, depending on the size. If you have a really large piece, you'd want to do it longer, but these pieces, as you'll see. So we're going to open this up. This is the plate that we had in there to keep the meat submerged. And then we have 2 pieces of brisket. There's one, and there's the second one. So there we have it. Now the smaller one I'm going to make into corned beef, which we're going to start today cooking. And the larger one we're going to make into corned beef, which is going to need to be rinsed, seasoned. It's supposed to be soaked for a period of time. I've had pretty good luck not soaking them. I might soak this while we're doing the other thing, and then I'll show you how to season it up and what to do with it. So I'm going to bring you closer. I'm going to rinse these off. They need to be rinsed off, and then we'll move ahead from there. Okay, so here we are at the stove. I got a pot of water on. So you want to put enough water in to cover your piece of meat. You don't want too much water, or you will take the piece of meat down to where, you'll take some of the flavoring. You dilute some of the flavoring. So I have about what I need for the piece of meat. And here's the piece of meat. So we're gonna put this in. There it is. Good. We're going to turn on the heat. And then I add about a half to 3/4 of a tablespoon of pickling spice, which is what was in the brine for the corned beef. And then I put in a little mirepoix, which is onions, carrots, and celery. Just to flavor the water a little bit and flavor the meat. It's the same things you'd be putting in if you were making corned beef and cabbage, except for no cabbage. So this it's on high. I'm going to cover it. I'm going to bring it to a boil, and then we're going to turn it down to a simmer, and it's going to take probably 2.5 hours of simmering it, just like a boiled dinner. When it's nice and tender, when it's fork tender, we'll take it out, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, see you back in a bit. Okay, so it's started to boil really hard, as you can see. So we're going to turn this down to a simmer. And allow our corned beef to simmer for, like I said, it's going to be a couple hours anyway. It's in there. Yeah, there we go. Starting to look like corned beef already. So we're going to let this simmer for, it's going to take about 2.5 hours. And I'll come back towards when it's done, and I'll show you. I really just usually stick a fork in it and twist, and you can kind of tell. You don't want it falling apart because you want to slice it for sandwiches, but you want it nice and soft. So we're going to put this back on here. Maybe not all the way. And we're going to let that simmer for a couple hours, and we'll be back. Okay, so while our first piece of meat is on the stove, just comfortably simmering away, we had 2 pieces of meat. We're going to do a second piece, And this is going to be pastrami. So this piece has been soaking in a little water in the sink. It actually calls for being soaked for 8 hours, just so you know. The last time I did this, the time before this, I soaked it for 8 hours, and it was not salty enough. And pastrami that's not salty enough tends to be a little flat, in my opinion. So the last time I did this, I don't think I soaked it at all, and it was pretty darn good. So I soaked this a little bit just to remove some of the surface salt, and now we're going to put on a rub, and then it's going to sit in the refrigerator uncovered for 2 days with the rub on it, and then we're going to smoke it. So right here is the rub. So in case you're keeping track of this, here is actually what's in the rub. So there are 2 tablespoons of whole black peppercorns, 2 tablespoons, and then they're smashed. I put them in a bag, a Ziploc bag, and I smash them with a meat mallet. So they're coarsely ground or cracked pepper. So that would be 2 tablespoons of the whole peppercorns cracked. And then there's 2 tablespoons of coarse ground black pepper. So that's 4 tablespoons of black pepper altogether. Then 1 tablespoon of whole coriander seeds, which I also smashed, so they're cracked coriander seeds. And then a tablespoon of ground coriander. And then we have a tablespoon of brown sugar, a tablespoon of paprika, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 2 teaspoons of onion powder, a ½ teaspoon of whole mustard seeds that I cracked as well, and then a ½ teaspoon of mustard powder, and that's all in here and mixed together. This has been rinsed. It's still damp, so because I want the rub to adhere, and we're going to apply this. Maybe that's a little too tight. But it sits in the refrigerator uncovered for 2 days, which allows the rub to really stick, so that when you do your smoking, it really adheres. It forms a crust on the outside. It's just beautiful. I'm going to bring you in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. Okay, so here we have the corned beef, and here we have the rub. So we're going to just start sprinkling this on. Pretty thick. That's about right. Now this is supposedly enough rub for like 4 pounds. So you'll have some left over, which is okay because you can use this. You can even rub this on a piece of meat and barbecue. And keep in mind that there's no salt in here, so you'd have to add salt. But you could rub this on a piece of barbecue, and I've made pastrami salmon before using the same spices. It's a really good spice rub. Kind of press it in there, make sure it's adhering pretty well. Any spots that you've missed. Like I said, you don't want it thick, but you want it covered. Okay, so now that's pretty good. Now we're going to just do the sides. I'm going to make sure it's all completely covered. Alright. And I should probably say that I picked this piece of meat for the pastrami and the other for the corned beef. Again, it's all corned beef. That's the first step to pastrami is corned beef. So we've got this pretty covered. It's about good enough right here. Anyway, they both start out as corned beef, and then you can decide whether you want to turn one into pastrami or not. So we've got this covered. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over here a little bit, and I have this rack that I use, and I'm going to set it on here. And careful, just set it on. You don't want to disturb your rub. And okay, so that's it. That's going to go in the refrigerator for 2 days, and then we're going to smoke it. So I'll invite you back when that happens. Okay, I will also be back to show you the corned beef when it's finished. So okay, I'll see you in a bit. Okay, welcome back. The corned beef is done. I'm going to take the lid off of here, and I'm going to take this out. Oops. And you can sort of see it's done, because you see that jiggling there? That pretty much means it's perfect, actually. So I'm going to set this on here. You can see that. And then I'm going to move it over to the big prep table and probably wait a couple of minutes, and we'll take a couple slices and see how it turned out. Okay. Okay, the meat is out. It's cooled off a bit. I think it'll slice okay. I just wanted to show you a little bit. I don't know how much of this you can see, but when I said before you stick a fork in it and give it a twist, well, if you stick a fork in here and you just start to twist, your fork actually goes through. You can actually see the fibers coming apart, which means it's done. I mean, it's not falling apart, but you're going to put it on sandwiches or something. So I thought we would slice into this. Another thing to notice, if you can see this, is that all the grain in this meat is running this way, which means we need to slice it this way. That's the best. It'll be the tenderest and juiciest. So let's give it a shot. So I hope you can see this. Let's see if I can get this a little closer. You can just take this and tear it right apart. It's perfect. When it cools, it'll get a little bit more solid if you wanted to make sandwiches out of it. But this is corned beef, and you'll be surprised at how good it is if you make it yourself. It's really not hard to do. Hold on a second. Okay, so that's the corned beef. Let me give it a little taste here and see how we do. Man, that's good. Oh, perfect. Perfect amount of salt. The brine, really good flavor. This is a really good recipe for corned beef. And like I said, excuse me. Like I said, overall it takes a lot of time. I made the brine, just basically salt, sugar, spices. the meat in. It needs to stay in there for like 5, 6, 7 days. This is small, so it's 5 is fine. And then you're done. You've got corned beef. You need the brisket, the brine, and 5 days. Now you're not doing something the whole time. You can even use a cooler with ice. It just needs to stay cold. It doesn't have to be really cold. Just refrigerate it. And then at the end of the time, this will keep. You can freeze it. It will keep for a long time because that's why they made corned beef. And then basically vegetables and some boiling water, and you got yourself either a meal or a really good sandwich. This looks like a Reuben calling me. I'll be back one more time with this film clip, to smoke the pastrami that we made out of the other piece of corned beef. But until then, I'll see you. I'll be back as soon as that's ready. Hello and welcome back. Our next step on the way to completely doing our 2 pieces of brisket is to finish out the pastrami. And we're going to pastrami. This has been in the refrigerator for several days so that the rub is really adhered on, and it'll stay there during the smoking process, delivering its flavor to the meat. So we're going to take this and I'm going to put it on the smoking rack. I'm going to put it this way because I know that before I put the rub on there, this is the fat side. And I put the fat side up so that as it renders, and it will with the heat, the juices go down into the meat and don't just drip off the bottom and go away. So I'm going to take this out and put it in the smoker, and it's going to smoke for about 6 or 7 hours. And then we're going to put it in the refrigerator overnight, and then tomorrow we're going to steam it. This is a recipe from Katz's, well, it's a recipe, Katz's Deli in New York. It's all secret, but this is as close as I've ever tasted. It's some of the best pastrami I've ever tasted. So I'm going to take you with me out there. We're going to put this in the smoker, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so there it is in the smoker. I got a water pan on. Maintain a little humidity in there so that the meat stays moist. We're going to set the timer, and then we'll come back and check on it and see how it's doing. Okay. Okay, here we are at the smoker. Get ready to check on the pastrami. So we're going to open the door here. A little bit of smoke coming out of here. And there we have it. Give it a little test on the old thermometer. And we'll see that it's registering really close to like 180, which is great, because we're going to actually smoke this more. Nope, we're going to actually steam this tomorrow. So let's bring this in on the counter, and I'll meet you in there in a second or two. Okay, like I said, there it is. It's registering about 178 on the thermometer, and as you can see, it's looking really good. That rub is really adhered. The smell of it with the spices and the smoke is just amazing. So now what we have to do is I'm going to place this on a rack like this, and I'm going to let this cool, and it's going to spend the night in the refrigerator, and then tomorrow we're going to steam it, and I'll tell you all about that. And that's going to finish the cook and make it really tender and sliceable, and really a lot like Katz's Deli in New York. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do that, and I'll see you then. Hello, welcome back. So we're in the last step of our pastrami as part of the brisket segment. We did corned beef last time. So the pastrami has been hanging out in the refrigerator overnight, and now it needs to be steamed. So I'm going to take you over there to the stove, and I'm going to show you my setup, and we'll get it going. Okay. Okay, so here we are at the stove. This is my, I found this old roaster at an antique place a long time ago, and it just really works out perfectly unless you have a really large pastrami piece. So what I have here is it has a pan. It came with this pan. So I put the pastrami in here, and underneath the pan I have wadded up some aluminum foil to keep the pan up out of the water, and then so it floats a little bit, but other than that it's good. So I put the pan on top of the aluminum foil, and you saw that it was full of water, and then we're going to turn on the burner to high until it gets up to temperature, and we're going to set this is a small piece of pastrami. I'm going to set this right in the middle of the pan there where it's going to steam. So I'm going to put the lid on here. Close this little vent, and it's going to have to steam for probably about an hour and 20 minutes, something like that. So when it comes up to temperature, I'll sort of I'll turn down the heat a little bit, so I want a nice good steam. I want to see steam coming out everywhere, and then the only other thing to do is to monitor the water level so that it doesn't dry out, because it could. This is probably, I probably check it about every half an hour to make sure there's still water in there, and if there's not enough, then I add a little bit more hot water. Okay, so we'll let this go for a while, and I'll come back when it's getting close to being done. Okay. Okay, so it's been steaming for a half an hour. I'm going to check the water level. And the temperature of the meat. Okay, so we're right around 180, which is not done. It needs to be right around 200 degrees to be done. So we're going to check to see if we're going to add a little water. Okay, so we're going to add some hot water to this to bring it back up, although there's still pretty much left. Okay. Get the pastrami back in. it up. It's only been a half an hour, so I didn't expect it to be done yet. Put this back on. I'm going to crank it up a bit. We're going to bring it back up to steaming temperature, and we're going to go away and check it in another half an hour. Okay? Okay, so it's been another half an hour, so I'm going to take the lid off here. And, oh, that smells wonderful. Oh my Lord. Those spices you can really smell. I'm going to take its temperature now, see where we're at. So we're at 198 degrees there. So I'm going to leave this on. I'd like to have it 200. So I'm going to leave this on for another 10 or 15 minutes and take its temperature again. And then probably pull it. Okay. See you in a bit. Okay, so it's been 10 more minutes. Take a look at this. Its temperature. Okay, so we're up to 200, maybe a little over. So the pastrami is done. I'm going to take it out of here. And we're going to put it over on a rack like that. And then I'm going to let that rest for about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll cut a little bit and we'll see what it looks like and maybe how it tastes. Okay. Okay, so that's the end of our journey on pastrami and corned beef, both made with brisket. Pastrami is originally from Romania, Romanian Jews, and I believe it was originally made with lamb, and it was made with all different kinds of meats. Like a lot of our things that we eat today, the brisket, which is a very, very cheap cut of meat, it was back then, was made usable by cooking it for a long, long time and seasoning it up really well. So we can thank our forefathers for this. It turned out really well. It's worth a try. It's a lot of things to do, but none of them really take up. I mean, when you're brining, you're not doing anything. You're just mixing up the brine, and you let it sit for 5-7 days, and then your corned beef is ready. Then you can put it right on to boil, or it'll last for a long time in the refrigerator. That's the whole idea of corning something. Which, by the way, the corned beef, the word corn comes from the fact that they used salt to cure the meat, and the salt that they used was in the size of corn kernels, so they called it corned. Now, I don't think it meant maize like we have. I think it meant corn like barley, about that size. But that's where it got its name, is the size of the salt crystals that they used to preserve it. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me. We're going to do some more. Come back, and I'll see you soon. Steve's Heritage Kitchen.